When Ryan Thompson first pulled into the driveway of his new home, he felt something he hadn't in years: peace. The sleek modern house sat near the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac, hugged by tall sycamore trees and well-manicured hedges. After 10 years of high-pressure work as a litigation attorney in the city, Ryan had finally decided to trade in courtrooms and chaos for something slower, quieter, and, hopefully, happier. The house wasn't massive, but it was his. More importantly, it was far away from office politics, endless phone calls, and the buzz of deadlines. He'd picked the neighborhood precisely for its reputation: calm, safe, well-organized. The kind of place where folks waved from their driveways and actually remembered your dog's name. A small homeowners association oversaw things, but the realtor had brushed it off as light touch, just enough to keep lawns neat and Christmas lights tasteful. The first few weeks were nothing short of blissful. Ryan spent his mornings sipping coffee on the back porch, watching squirrels dart across the wooden fence while sunlight filtered lazily through the trees. His golden retriever, Cooper, had more space to run than ever before, and the air felt clean in a way that was almost unfamiliar after years in the city. Even errands felt less urgent, less frantic. He was settling in, body and soul. One of his first upgrades had been the installation of a Level 2 EV charger in his garage. He drove a Tesla, a quiet, gleaming Model Y, and part of his joy in this new life was being able to finally plug it in overnight. No more fighting for a charging stall downtown or waiting at stations. The charger installation wasn't cheap, but it was sleek, fast, and powered through a dedicated line with smart monitoring. Ryan had taken the time to wire it properly, tucked away neatly in the garage, with an extension port if he ever wanted to install one outside for guests. For him, it was more than a charger. It was part of his fresh start. Days turned into weeks. The neighbors, though reserved, were pleasant enough. The woman 2 houses down dropped off lemon muffins on the first weekend. A retired couple across the street waved every morning during their 6 a.m. walks. A few houses over, a prim, sharply dressed woman named Karen had briefly introduced herself during a neighborhood welcome mixer. She mentioned she was on the HOA board and offered a tight smile when Ryan asked about bylaws or monthly dues. "Don't worry," she'd said. "As long as you keep things tidy, you won't hear from us." At the time, it had seemed like a fair enough arrangement. By all accounts, Ryan had landed exactly where he wanted to be. Quiet neighborhood, friendly people, and the space to just breathe again. He found joy in the little things: mowing his own lawn on weekends, experimenting with a vegetable patch in the backyard, and teaching Cooper to play fetch without running into traffic. The city felt like a past life now. He had no idea that under the surface of this calm, something, or someone, was already testing the limits of his patience and privacy. Something small, something sneaky, something that would spark a battle. He never expected to fight, but for now the days were warm, the nights cool, and Ryan Thompson believed, wholeheartedly, that he'd finally found peace. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. It started as a flicker, just a small passing oddity that didn't quite add up. One evening, as Ryan thumbed through his mail at the kitchen counter, he paused at the utility bill. His brow furrowed. It was nearly $100 higher than the previous month. He stood there for a moment, blinking at the numbers, trying to justify them. Maybe he'd use the dryer more often. Had he left the AC running while he was out of town for that weekend wedding? Still, it didn't sit right. The spike felt out of place, especially considering how meticulous he'd been about managing his energy usage since moving in. Shrugging it off as an anomaly, Ryan paid the bill and went on with his evening. But once you notice something's off, it's hard to unsee the signs. A few days later, he stepped into the garage to unplug his Tesla and frowned. The car hadn't fully charged overnight. The charger's LED ring was still blinking yellow instead of the familiar green that greeted him every morning. Odd. He double-checked the app. No software errors, no outages. He tried to write it off. Maybe the charger had glitched. Maybe he'd forgotten to plug it in all the way. But even then, something about it scratched at the back of his mind like an itch he couldn't quite reach. Then came the sounds, soft, distant, and always after dark. Twice that week, Ryan had been woken around 2 a.m. by what sounded like faint movement near the garage. The first time, he'd blamed it on a raccoon, or maybe even Cooper bumping into something downstairs. But Cooper was always curled up at the foot of the bed, motionless and deep in sleep. The second night, the sound came again. Metal shifting, maybe a footstep, soft but distinct. When he flicked on the porch light and peered out through the window, there was nothing there. Just the empty driveway, bathed in yellow glow, and a light wind stirring the leaves. Still, something gnawed at him. One morning, while sipping his coffee, Ryan opened the Tesla app to check his charging stats. His eyes narrowed. The data showed a small but steady draw from the charger, even during hours he knew he wasn't using it. Somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m., several days in a row. His pulse quickened. "Am I imagining this?" he muttered aloud. He walked out to the garage again, examining the charger. Nothing seemed tampered with, at least not visibly. The port, the cable, the control box, all in place. But now the feeling, in his gut, was unmistakable. Someone was using it, somehow. Without his permission, Ryan wasn't paranoid by nature. Years in law had taught him to trust facts, not feelings. But he also knew when the facts were whispering. Something's wrong. Here, quiet as it had been, the neighborhood wasn't immune to opportunists. Maybe it was a one-off. Maybe someone had slipped in, used the charger in a pinch, and moved on. But why the same hours every time? His mind cycled through possibilities. A curious teen, a delivery driver, maybe even a neighbor who thought it wouldn't be noticed. But who would be that bold? Who had the audacity to sneak into his garage, or at least onto his property, night after night? That night, as he locked up, Ryan stood in the doorway to the garage and stared at the charger. Its LED light glowed, softly, humming with stored energy. "Let's see if you hum tomorrow," he muttered, flicking off the light. Something was happening, and he was going to find out what. Ryan wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but he believed in evidence. If something strange was happening on his property, he needed to see it for himself. The next day, he stopped by a local tech shop and picked up a discreet Wi-Fi security camera, small, motion-activated, with night vision and live feed access. Nothing fancy, just enough to catch a raccoon or, in his gut-feeling case, a person. He mounted it high in the corner of his garage, angled just enough to capture the charger, the driveway, and anyone who might wander too close. Then, he waited. That night, he turned in early but left his phone on his nightstand, volume up, notifications enabled. Cooper, sensing his owner's alertness, stayed curled beside him but kept his ears perked. Hours passed. Midnight came and went in silence. But at 2:13 a.m., the soft chime of a motion alert buzzed against the wood of the nightstand. Ryan's eyes snapped open. He grabbed the phone, tapped the app, and stared. The camera feed was grainy in the low light, but there, just barely, he saw movement. A figure, cloaked in the shadows of the garage's outer edge, walked calmly toward the EV charger. The person moved with eerie confidence, not rushed or nervous. They plugged something in, not Ryan's car, but a separate cord. Maybe an adapter. The shape of the vehicle was mostly obscured off-frame, but it was clear someone was stealing his electricity. The figure was wearing a hoodie, pulled low, and the angle didn't give a clear shot of their face. Still, the body language struck Ryan as oddly familiar. Not the fumbling of a stranger, not the desperation of a thief. This was someone who felt entitled. He watched, jaw tight, as the figure stood there for a moment, checked something on their phone, then casually walked off camera as if they owned the place. In the morning, Ryan downloaded the clip and watched it again over coffee, this time on a larger screen. He paused and rewound repeatedly, trying to sharpen the image with his eyes. No license plate, no distinct features. Just that unnerving confidence in the intruder's movements. He considered going to the police, but what would he say? A blurry figure used his charger and didn't steal any physical property? The footage wouldn't hold up as evidence, not... Yet, instead, he decided to probe the neighborhood. The next afternoon, Ryan took Cooper on a slow walk around the cul-de-sac, casually greeting neighbors along the way. He stopped in front of a few houses making small talk, asking about their weekends, mentioning how weird electricity prices were lately, even slipping in. "You ever have someone mess around near your garage at night?" Most people laughed. It-off shook their heads or offered sympathetic shrugs. The retired couple across the street looked genuinely surprised. But when he bumped into Karen, the ever-crisp, always-watching HOA board member, her reaction was, off. "Oh, that?" she said, waving her hand a little too quickly. "Probably just some dumb teenager being stupid. Or maybe someone mistook your charger for public use. You should put a sign or something." Ryan gave her a tight smile. "Yeah, maybe." She didn't ask what made him bring it up. She didn't ask if anything was stolen. She didn't even pretend to be concerned. That night, as he sat on his porch watching the sun go down, a thought began to take shape in Ryan's mind. A hunch he didn't like having. There were only a handful of people in the neighborhood who drove electric vehicles, and even fewer who would know how to use someone else's private charger without setting off alarms or questions. Karen drove a Lucid Air, brand new, fully electric, and she'd made a pointed comment about his charger being visible from the street at the welcome mixer. He stared down at the cold coffee in his mug, jaw set. No one had confessed. No one had slipped up. But someone was helping themselves to his property, and they thought he wouldn't notice. He'd seen enough to know the theft was real. Now it was time to see just how bold the thief really was. The next morning, Ryan didn't waste time. He printed a still image from the blurry video, the shadowy figure leaning over the charger, and walked to the HOA office, which was conveniently housed inside a small, repurposed corner unit near the neighborhood entrance. It looked more like a clubhouse than a government building, with flower boxes under the windows, and a bulletin board cluttered with bake sale flyers and lost cat notices. Inside, he was greeted by the sharp scent of lemon cleaner and an air of smug formality. Karen was already seated at the front desk, tapping something out on a tablet with overly manicured nails. She looked up and smiled with practiced politeness, but her eyes didn't match the smile. "Ryan," she said, as if she'd been expecting him. "Something I can help you with?" "I think so," he said, holding up the printed image. "Someone's been using my EV charger at night. I caught this on camera. Thought the HOA might want to know there's trespassing happening." Karen took the paper, glanced at it for all of 2 seconds, and gave a dismissive chuckle. "That could be anyone. A shadow, a smudge on the lens. These doorbell cameras always exaggerate movement." "It's a dedicated garage cam," Ryan corrected, watching her carefully. "And I've got time-stamped footage showing several incidents." Karen set the paper aside like it was junk mail. "Well, unless you caught them in the act or got a license plate, there's really not much we can do. HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over private disputes. If you're that concerned, maybe keep your garage closed at night." "I do," he said slowly. "The charger's outside." Her eyes flicked to him, quick and calculating. "That's part of the issue, then. Your charger is clearly visible from the street, which actually may violate Section 4B of the HOA's Exterior Appearance Guidelines." Ryan blinked. "You're saying my charger is the problem?" Karen leaned forward, clasping her hands with that infuriatingly condescending smile. "I'm just saying the visibility creates temptation. If you didn't want strangers noticing it, maybe it shouldn't be so prominent." There it was, her pivot from faux concern to quiet threat. "And if it does turn out to be a guideline violation, she added. "You may receive a warning notice in the mail. Possibly a fine if it's not corrected within 30 days. Ryan stood still for a beat, processing her words. He had come to report theft, and somehow she'd flipped it to make him the problem. "Right," he said flatly. "I'll keep that in mind." On his way out, he passed a corkboard covered in photos. From past HOA meetings, one caught his eye, Karen standing proudly next to a gleaming white Lucid Air. Same model he'd seen cruising down the street last week. Same one that, curiously, was never parked in her driveway. Always tucked behind the house. Always out of direct sight. He stepped out into the sun, the image still fresh in his mind, and something inside him hardened. Karen wasn't just dismissing the complaint. She was deflecting, dodging, and threatening fines over a charger she herself might be stealing power from. This wasn't just a neighbor being annoying. This was personal. Back at home, Ryan pulled up the HOA bylaws he'd been given during his move. Section 4B was vague at best, and it certainly didn't mention EV chargers. Just a catch-all about unsightly or disruptive exterior equipment. Nothing enforceable, nothing binding. Not unless someone on the board, like Karen, decided to weaponize it. She'd overplayed her hand, and Ryan had no intention of folding. If she wanted to play games, he'd give her one she wouldn't forget. Ryan had spent enough of his life around wires, circuits, and stubborn problems to know that solutions were rarely as complicated as they seemed. Before switching to law, he'd been a systems engineer, 10 years of diagnosing electrical quirks and designing smarter infrastructure. Those skills hadn't dulled, they'd just been shelved. Now he intended to dust them off. The plan began with a second camera. He installed it covertly, nestled beneath the eaves of the garage, camouflaged within a decorative light fixture. Higher angle, better resolution, direct line of sight to both the charger and the driveway. This one had two-way audio and infrared night vision, crystal clear. He didn't want shadows this time. He wanted a face. Next, he cracked open the charger's interface panel. With a few custom relays and a smart switch hidden behind the siding, he built in a remote disconnect, one he could trigger from his phone with a single tap. He rewired it so if someone plugged into the charger between midnight and 4 a.m., the system would send him a silent push notification. If he gave the green light, power would flow. If not, nothing. It would appear broken and, just for fun, he added a twist. A second dummy charger cable, visibly plugged in but dead inside. It looked like the real deal, long and accessible, as if he'd carelessly left it out again. To a casual observer, or a repeat thief, it would scream, "Come on, free juice." But the real trap wasn't the camera or the fake cable. It was the moment. The thief wouldn't know they were walking into a monitored zone with a timed setup and a remote trigger. They'd think it was just another free charge, and Ryan would be watching. 3 nights passed without a blip. The notifications remained silent. Ryan started wondering if word had somehow gotten out. Maybe Karen had picked up on his visit to the HOA and backed off. Maybe the blurry figure had gotten spooked. Then, at 2:47 a.m. on the 4th night, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. One soft chime. Ryan's eyes opened instantly. The app loaded fast. The live feed came up. There it was. A figure stepping into the frame. Hoodie again. Same slouched posture. Same quiet confidence. Except this time, the resolution was sharp enough to see the details. The brand logo on the shoes. The keys dangling from a lanyard on their belt loop and beneath the hood. The unmistakable cut of a platinum blonde bob. His pulse quickened. Karen. No mistaking it now. Even in low light, her face came into view as she glanced around, unaware of the camera directly above her. She moved like she'd done this a dozen times, unplugged the dummy charger from its mount, examined the cord and muttered something under her breath. She tried to plug it into her sleek white Lucid, but it didn't latch. Ryan tapped the power override. The charger's LED went dark. Karen frowned, jiggled the connector,
Tried again. Still dead. Then she pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight,
and leaned in, peering at the panel like she might inspect the wiring herself. That's when the camera caught her face full on. No hood, no shadows. Just Karen from the HOA, 2:49 a.m., red-handed on someone else's property. Ryan recorded the footage, saved the backup to a cloud drive, and let out a long, controlled breath. Cooper, sensing the shift in his energy, stirred slightly at the edge of the bed. "It's okay, buddy," Ryan whispered. "We got her." But he didn't rush outside. No confrontation. Not yet. Karen had crossed the line, but Ryan wasn't interested in an argument at 3 a.m. He wanted proof, and now he had it, clear as daylight. All that was left was to let her dig the rest of her grave. She fiddled with the cord a moment longer, then gave up, muttering something he couldn't hear. She looked around once more, annoyed, then climbed back into her car and rolled silently out of the driveway. Ryan sat back against his pillows, phone resting in his palm, heart still pounding. The trap had worked. Now it was time to spring it. Next morning, Ryan was already dressed and sipping his second cup of coffee when the sun crept over the rooftops. Cooper sat by the sliding door, tail wagging slowly, ears alert as if sensing something was about to happen. Ryan's laptop sat open on the kitchen counter. The security footage from the night before paused on a crystal-clear frame. Karen's face, frowning under the garage light, caught mid-plug. It was perfect. Not just the image, but the sequence. Multiple clips from multiple nights. Her car's make, model, the repeated timestamps. The system logs from the charger, showing unauthorized power draw down to the minute. All lined up neatly, irrefutably. And Ryan, being Ryan, had emailed a copy of everything to a private cloud server, just in case things got messy. By 10 a.m., he was walking to the HOA office again, USB drive in his pocket, and a calm, even smile on his face. Karen was at her desk, as usual, this time wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and sipping from a metallic pink travel mug. Her posture screamed authority, untouchable. She didn't even look up when she heard the door open. "Back so soon?" she said without warmth. Ryan took his time. He approached the counter, pulled the USB from his pocket, and set it down lightly between them. "Thought you might want to take a look at this before we talk about that visible charger violation." "Again?" She paused. Her eyes flicked toward the drive. She didn't reach for it. "What is it?" she asked flatly. "Video footage," Ryan said, folding his arms. "Of someone repeatedly trespassing on my property, using my charger, without permission. You might recognize them." Karen gave a short, humorless laugh. "If you're trying to accuse someone without real evidence, I'd think twice. This community has very strict rules about slander." "No slander," Ryan replied. "Just time-stamped security footage, EV charge logs, and motion alert history. All cross-referenced. I've got 6 separate nights, all with matching data. You're in everyone." Her smile faltered, just barely. A flicker of something crossed her face. Maybe surprise, maybe calculation. "And if I was?" she said slowly. "This is a community resource. We look out for each other. It's not like I damaged anything. If your charger was unsecured, that's not theft, it's just shared usage." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "On private property, at 2 a.m, without consent?" Karen leaned back, suddenly all false confidence. "Do you really want to push this, Ryan? You're new here. These kinds of misunderstandings can make things uncomfortable, especially with the board." He smiled. "Funny thing. I looked into that too. You've been on the board for 3 years. Plenty of time to rewrite certain enforcement clauses. Make vague language work in your favor." Karen's mouth tightened, but she said nothing. "I also filed a report this morning with the local precinct. I included the footage. They were very interested in your car's license plate, by the way." Her eyes flashed. "You went to the police?" Ryan's tone never changed. "Sure did. theft of electricity, trespassing, misuse of private property. That's 3 charges minimum. Possibly more if they decide your position in the HOA enabled the abuse. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Karen's smug mask cracked just slightly, her hands tightening around the rim of her mug. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, then reached for the USB and plugged it into her computer like she might find some way to spin it. But as the first frame played, the slow zoom of her approaching the charger, she let out a soft, involuntary breath. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was cinematic. "You don't want to make enemies on this board," she finally muttered, eyes still on the screen. "I don't want enemies," Ryan said calmly. "I want boundaries and respect. But if this board can't handle that, maybe it's time someone cleaned house." He turned and walked out, the automatic door sliding closed behind him with a soft hiss. Outside, the day was bright, and for the first time since he moved in, the air felt clear. Karen might have thought her position gave her immunity, but Ryan had played the long game, and the mask was off now, for good. Karen's attempt to spin the story began almost immediately after Ryan walked out of the HOA office. By that evening, an email blast had gone out from the HOA's official account, subject line, clarifying recent allegations regarding HOA board conduct. It was carefully worded, dripping with performative professionalism. It vaguely referenced misunderstandings involving shared community resources and made a pointed statement about incomplete narratives damaging the spirit of neighborhood unity. But the neighborhood wasn't buying it. Ryan hadn't just sat on the footage. After filing the police report that morning, he compiled a short video montage. Nothing flashy, just clean edits showing Karen arriving on different nights, charging her car, and leaving without a word. He included timestamps, charger logs, and even clipped in the HOA violation notice she'd sent him about unauthorized charger visibility. It was quiet, it was factual, and it was devastating. He didn't post it online. This wasn't about internet drama. He simply shared it privately with his immediate neighbors, attaching a short message. "In case you've been hearing conflicting stories, here's the full truth." The ripple effect was immediate. One neighbor, then another responded. Some shocked, others not at all surprised. Apparently, Karen's reputation for bending the rules wasn't new. She'd fined a family 2 houses down for having unapproved flower pots, while letting her friend host noisy parties with no citations. She'd threatened a retiree over a porch wind chime. Her misuse of power wasn't new, but now, for the first time, there was proof. By the weekend, a special HOA meeting was called. Ryan didn't need to rally people. The footage had done that for him. He simply showed up, sat in the second row, and listened as one board member after another tried to maintain order while neighbors took turns at the mic. Why does she get to use someone else's electricity like it's hers? Where's the accountability? We pay dues to enforce rules, not break them. Karen sat at the end of the table, arms crossed tightly across her chest, her mouth a thin, tense line. She tried to speak once, something about miscommunication and shared community responsibilities. But she was met with a chorus of frustrated voices. "No more gaslighting, Karen. You stole power, repeatedly, and lied about it. That was the turning point. The board, embarrassed and facing a mini uprising, voted right there and then to suspend Karen pending an investigation. It was mostly symbolic, but still. Her authority was gone, her grip over the neighborhood severed by her own hubris and a charger cord. Ryan didn't gloat. He didn't need to. After the meeting, several neighbors approached him. Some just nodded in thanks. Others apologized for not believing him sooner. A few asked if he might consider running for the board in the next election. "I'm not sure," he replied with a chuckle. "I didn't move here to play politics." But deep down, it felt good to know that standing his ground, quietly, firmly, with facts, had worked. Karen's downfall hadn't come from rage or revenge. It had come from her underestimating the quiet guy with the EV charger, and the neighborhood watching more closely than she ever realized. The final decision came 2 weeks later, tucked into an official-looking HOA letterhead envelope that landed in Ryan's mailbox with a satisfying thunk. He didn't rush to open it. Instead, he poured himself a cup of coffee, let Cooper curl up beside him on the couch, and peeled it open at a steady pace, already knowing somehow what it would say. Karen had been officially removed from her position on the board, effective immediately. The letter also included a fine levied against her for unauthorized use of private utilities, something the board had never bothered enforcing until now. Apparently, the public pressure had made them suddenly rediscover the rule book. Funny how that worked. News spread fast. It didn't help Karen's case that no one claimed responsibility, had quietly leaked snippets of the charger footage to a local neighborhood forum. The reactions were swift and, for Karen, brutal. No more clipped, polite smiles from the dog-walking moms. No more whispered deference from new homeowners. She had become a walking cautionary tale, and Ryan? He didn't celebrate with fanfare or public victory laps. Instead, he focused on something practical. He installed a new EV charging system. This time equipped with a retractable locking cable, smart user authentication, and a steel-locked exterior outlet box. The installation wasn't cheap, but it was clean, secure, and exactly what he needed for peace of mind. Still, the changes ran deeper than just wires and locks. Neighbors who once only offered brief waves began stopping to chat. One couple brought over a bottle of wine and a plate of homemade cookies, thanking him for standing up when no one else did. Another neighbor, Tom, the elderly man from 2 doors down, started inviting Ryan to weekend BBQs. Even the kids from across the street started saying hello when they biked past, calling him Mr. Ryan like he was some local legend. The street felt different now, not just safer, but warmer, more connected, and maybe that was the real win. What had started as a quiet life disrupted by an entitled neighbor had evolved into something Ryan hadn't expected, a community that cared, not just about rules, but about each other. They had seen what unchecked power looked like. They'd watched someone misuse trust and bully from behind a title, and they'd stood together when it counted. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and Cooper dozed at his feet, Ryan leaned against the side of his garage, sipping a drink and watching his EV hum quietly under the orange sky. The new charger light blinked steady green. He smiled. Karen had tried to take advantage of his silence, but in the end, she'd only amplified his voice. And now, for the first time since he moved in, this truly felt like home. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.